The answer past profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of eons. I now see it here to receive and uphold it, vow to fathom its true meaning, to liberate all beings, thus generate the supreme bodhicitta. Let us now continue with our class on the Surangama Sutra. Ananda was indeed quite fortunate and meritorious, as he was renowned as the foremost in erudition. On top of that, he had such great merits to become an ordained monastic. However, there are still lots of afflictions, and he still had not attained full realization. And then he stated that his afflictions are just like the recurrent fevers. So he requested the Buddha to bestow a teaching compassionately to the sentient beings upon the knot of the body and mind. What is the fundamental knot that sentient beings have which caused the recurrent fever? And why are sentient beings still wandering in samsara, in the three existence? What is the fundamental knot that caused it? So that's the question he posed to the Buddha. At that time, maybe he was deeply touched, and then he started to profusely cry and weep in front of the Buddha. As we also stated yesterday, there are people who tend to be very sensitive, and they're easily get affected by the Dharma teachings. And I think that's quite important. That's a very important quality for anyone listening to the Dharma. While listening to the Dharma teachings, if you were to be able to reflect those teachings upon yourself and then feel ashamed about your past inappropriate activities and then start to cry profusely, also at the time of encountering the precious Dharma teachings, you could probably feel this joy that you cannot control, and you would feel quite joyous at that time. In such a way, if you were such kind of sensitive people, then the blessings, if you have those characteristics, then the blessings of a Buddhas and Bodhisattvas can merge into your mind stream very easily. Otherwise, if you were to feel nothing, whatever kinds of teachings and however kinds of teachings that you've received, you are simply like a rock being thrown inside water. The quality of the rock is not going to be moistened by the quality of water. In such a way, the listening of the Dharma is not going to be helpful and beneficial to you at all. Some of the newcomers over here, or people who first encounter Dharma, they're quite passionate and curious about the Dharma teachings. They're easily to be touched by the Dharma. But after a long period of time, I think, as I can notice from some of our fellow practitioners, people's passion to the Dharma started to cool down, and even the practitioners would become quite jaded. In such a way, it is not going to be very easy for you to receive the blessings, and that would be such a pity. But look at Venerable Ananda, all the way from the very beginning till now, he can be considered to be someone who has that quality of being very sensitive, and he cried profusely, just like the rainy days we've been having lately. That probably means that he definitely feels and get really touched by the Dharma teachings. If one were to get easily cried and touched by the Dharma, at least that shows one is not that arrogant. Then the world-honored one took pity on Ananda and on those in the assembly with something left to study, as well as on the living beings of the future, in order to help them transcend transcend the world and become the eyes for the future. He rubbed the crown of Ananda's head with his Jambunada purple golden bright hand. Instantaneously, all the Buddha lands in the 10 directions quakes in 6 ways. So the Buddha, in fact, quite cared about his family members and cared about all of the Shakya families. When he noticed Ananda cried again for the 6th time, he compassionately touched his crown. Also, the world-honored one took pity not only on Ananda but on those in the assembly with something left to study, as well as the living beings of the future, in order to help them to transcend the world and become the eyes for the future. The eyes for the future refers to the correct Dharma. Also, the spiritual teachers are referred as the eyes for the future. But over here, I think mainly it points to the speech of the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha becomes the eyes for the future. After the 2,500 years of the Buddha's passing, we can still see this particular teaching. And it is equivalent to say that the teachings of the Buddha is just like the eyes for the future. So the Buddha used his hands, the hands of the purple golden colored hands of Jambudvipa, because Jambudvipa has the most beautiful gold. So the purple golden bright hand of the Buddha touches the crown of Ananda. The Buddha is so compassionate. On one hand, the Buddha scolded Ananda, and on the other, blessed Ananda by touching his head. At that time, out of the 10 directions, simultaneously, all the Buddha lands occurred 6 types of quakes. I think we've already covered the 6 types of quakes, such as cracking, roaring, striking, erupting, and so on. But those are not the kinds of earthquake that we can feel. Rather, those are the kinds of quakes and movements can be felt and can be perceived by the bodhisattvas of different bhumis. Why 6, you may ask? It is because the Dharma wheels that the Buddha is going to turn is going to purify the 6 roots and 6 objects, to purify them into pure wisdom. That is why there appeared 6 types of quakes. And then Ananda, at the time of attaining this Dharma with the Buddha's blessings, then the interrelations between animate and inanimate world are indeed unified. It is because of such kinds of causes and conditions there is the auspicious sign of the 6 quakes. And then the thus come ones, as numerous as fine motes of dust, each dwelling in their respective world, emitting a precious light from the crown of his head. At that time, as numerous as fine motes of dust, the different Buddhas of different world emits precious lights from the crown of their heads. All the precious and jewel-like lights emitted from the crown of each of the Buddhas. And then at one and the same time, their light went from their own countries, from their own pure lands to the Jada Grove. All of their lights then shone forth and went to India, went to this Saha world in the Jambudvipa and to India and to Jeddah Grove and anointed the crown of the thus come one's head. The light didn't enter into the throat center or heart center, rather all of the lights entered into the crown of Buddha Shakyamuni. This echoes the name of this Surangama Sutra, which is the sutra from the crown of the great Buddha's head. The Tathagatas of the 10 directions bestowed blessings to this sutra. This particular sign also demonstrates that the realizations of all the Buddhas are also the same, is also the same. It is the same as that is spoken in the Surangama Samadhi. Some of you probably feel that, the realization to Shakyamuni Buddha is probably one type of realization, and then to Amitabha is a different type of realization, and to the Akshobhya is another type of realization. Some of you may think in such a way, but that is not true. The realizations of all the Tathagatas are equivalent, are the same. That is why we would say that within the secret wisdom Dharmadhatu of all the Buddhas, they are of one taste. All the Buddhas are of one taste. At the time, all the Tathagatas of the 10 directions emitting light from their crowns and then enters into the crown of Shakyamuni Buddha, that is quite rare. All the great assemblies within the Surangama assembly had never seen or heard of such before. That is why we had never heard of teachings as profound as this before either. So this teaching is very rare and very difficult to have the opportunities to receive. And then Ananda and everyone in the great assembly heard the thus come one, as numerous as 5 modes of dust throughout the 10 directions speak to Ananda with different mouths but in a single voice. Good indeed, Ananda, you wish to recognize your innate ignorance that caused you to turn on the wheel. The origin of the knot of birth and death is simply your 6 sense organs and nothing else. At that time, Ananda, as well as the great assembly present, everybody heard that all the Tathagatas, as numerous as the motes of dust, speak all together simultaneously to Ananda, saying that Ananda, good indeed, good Ananda, good Ananda. This is quite rare. If you want to know this co-emergent ignorance, if you want to know the ignorant, the innate ignorance that causes you to turn on the wheel of samsara, because Ananda wanted to know about the origin of the knot of birth and death. This part is really quite the profound part of the teaching within the Surangama Sutra, because all the Buddhas said that if you want to know this innate ignorance within all the sentient beings that cause you and all the sentient beings to be reborn in samsara, in the wheel of samsara, you should know that the origin is simply your 6 sense organs and nothing else. Other than the 6 sense organs, there is nothing else. Previously, when we talked about the 12 nidanas, we usually would start from the ignorance or self-grasping or sakkayaditthi, the view of grasping on self. But in the Surangama Sutra, it says that the very innate ignorance is because of the 6 sense organs and nothing else. Ignorance or the 6 sense organs, in fact, the meaning should be the same. You also want to understand the unsurpassed Bodhi so that you can quickly realize bliss, liberation, tranquility, and wonderful permanence. It too is your 6 organs and nothing else. isn't that confusing? Ananda must be confused then. So the Buddha said that, well, the route for you to be reborn in samsara is the 6 sense organs, and then the key for you to quickly realize liberation is also the 6 sense organs. Other than the 6 sense organs, there is nothing else either. Ananda must be quite confused at this point, because previously the Buddhas pointed out that the root of samsara is the 6 sense organs, the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. And now the Buddhas then stated that the root of liberation is also the 6 sense organs. Other than that, there is nothing else. The Buddhas of the 10 directions had spoken to Ananda in such a way, but this is really crucial. For example, Master Han Shan stated that this is the correct cause of this is a great cause of correct causes and conditions. Why is that? It is at the time of making such aspiration at the causal ground, one would be able to obtain the same realization and the same kinds of attainment of all the Buddhas at the fruition ground. So it is one Buddha that gives the teaching to Ananda, but over here it is that the Buddhas of the 10 directions give the same teaching to Ananda. Though it appears to be the teachings given to Ananda, in fact, those are the teachings given to all of us as well by the Buddhas of the 10 directions. Though we cannot see the Buddhas of the 10 directions nor Buddha Shakyamuni in person, the blessings they had bestowed to this Dharma, they have granted to this Dharma, we would be able to obtain it as well, just like Ananda. In some of the sutras, such as the Avatamsaka Sutra, it says that the Buddhas of the 10 directions came to the same realization. And then it says that all the Buddhas would then demonstrate the Dharma teaching at the same time, simultaneously. Also in the Amitabha Sutra, it states that the Buddhas of the 6 directions would help you to generate the great faith. In different sutras, there are different Buddhas that would guide you to study the sutras, such as the Kshitigarbha Sutra and then the Vimalakkhati Sutra, all quoted that the Buddhas of the 10 directions radiates light of wisdom and grand blessings. Of course, as mundane beings, we cannot perceive them, those kinds of blessings or Buddhas of the 10 directions. It would be difficult for us to even imagine such. Without even speaking of those transcendental powers of the Tathagatas, when we contemplate up on the knowledge that the mundane beings have acquired in the worldly sense, if we're not professionals in those aspects, such as astronomy and the geology or oceanology and so on and so forth, because our wisdom is definitely very limited, but we cannot fathom all the different knowledge based on our very limited wisdom. Why this particular teaching is so important? It is because this teaching had been given by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas simultaneously at the same time and radiated light to teach Ananda. So that we need to understand 2 aspects. The first one is that all of the sacred teachings and sacred meanings of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are the same. And then the second key is to help Ananda to give rise to genuine devotion and faith. If Shakyamuni Buddha were to give the same teaching, well, he would still believe it, but he would think that it is because Shakyamuni Buddha is my cousin. That is why. He may think in such a way, but if the Buddhas of the 10 directions were to simultaneously give the same teaching to Ananda, then Ananda would definitely place a great importance to this particular teaching and even greater faith to this teaching. So we need to understand that the very foundation of nirvana is the 6 sensory organs, and the same fundamental basis for samsara is also by the 6 sensory organs. So in order to obtain liberation, we have to learn how to use the 6 sensory organs. We should not follow and grasp onto the different colors and different forms of this world that kept on producing, nor to have different kinds of dualistic thoughts to hold on to it. Otherwise, we would forever be drowned in this suffering ocean of samsara. And then let's look at the next part. It says that Ananda heard these sounds of Dharma, but he did not yet understand in his mind. Bowing his head, he said to the Buddha, "How can what caused me to revolve in the cycle of birth and death, and what enables me to gain bliss and wonderful permanence, be the 6 sense organs in both cases and nothing else?" This is my Tibetan nurse. In the past, I only know young female nurses, but this nurse is different. Nowadays, there are different training programs of nurse. In the past, I think the doctors and nurse were trained together over here, but that's only domestically. Abroad, they are trained separately. The other day, the doctor said that he doesn't do any injections with the needles, so he had to find a nurse. And I thought it would be a young female nurse that I was so accustomed to, but an old lama showed up, and his hand was quite shaky. Not today, though. Ananda over here said that he heard the sounds of the Dharma teaching of the Tathagatas of the 10 directions, but he did not understand the meaning in his mind. According to Master Jiao Guang, in his commentary, he said that usually the Shravakayana, within Shravakayana, there are the teachings of the 18 dhatus. But over here, it only spoke of the 6 sensory organs, the 6 roots. So he felt that not all the phenomena are included in here. On top of that, he felt that as a Shravaka practitioner, not all the phenomena of samsara and nirvana are included in this teaching of the 6 sensory organs. So he had not again understanding of the non-duality of samsara and nirvana. Therefore, he then bowed in front of the Buddha again, saying that he still did not understand the true teaching. He said that, well, I don't understand how the root that led him to revolve in the cycle of birth and death, which is samsara, is the same to bliss and permanence, that is nirvana. So he said that, well, how could it be that it is both the 6 sense organs? It is in both cases and nothing else. He kept on asking the Buddha, saying that I don't understand. I don't understand the non-duality of nirvana and samsara. And then the Buddha started to give the teachings of the root of both samsara and nirvana is the sense organs. In fact, this part of the teachings coincide with that of the Vajrayana teachings. Though the terminologies are different, the content should be rather quite akin. So at the times of studying Surangama Sutra, if you were to be quite proficient in the five treatises, when it adapts into the field of Buddhist logic or Abhidharma or emptiness of Madhyamika or Prajnaparamitas, realization, then it could be quite helpful for you to understand it. On top of that, if you were to have acquired knowledge of Vajrayana, especially Mahaati, and some of the relating tantras and pithy instructions, then if you were to study Surangama Sutra, you would be able to delve into it much deeper, and you would be benefited from the sutra more so than the others. The Buddha then told Ananda, saying that the sense organs and the objects are the same source. The bonds and the release are not two. The nature of the consciousness is empty and false. It is like strange flowers in space. Over here, the Buddha told Ananda, saying that the 6 roots and the 6 objects are of one source. The 6 objects are outside. We usually would refer to them as something external, and the 6 roots are our eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, the 6 roots. Ultimately speaking, they are not existent. In relative truth, then out of causes and conditions, they can both be produced. So both of them do not have any true existence, do not have any true nature. And it is the same when it is liberated or being fettered. In the conventional truth, both of them can be established. Both of them would appear. But if we were to make observations of them in ultimate truth, neither of them can be established, can be existent. We've already studied that in the fundamental wisdom of Madhyamika, and if you study that, you'll be able to understand it quite easily. In the 3 liberations of Longchenpa, it also talks about how liberation is fetter and fetter is liberation. Similarly, the root and the objects are of the same source. The liberation is non-dual. It is simply that we need to recognize the nature of it. We need to understand the nature of consciousness is false. It is simply just like flowers blossoming in space. Over here, Ananda's question also talks about the roots. The 6 sensory organs and the objects are the 6 defiling objects and the 6 consciousness, which then forms the 18 dhatus. So the 6 consciousness, 6 sensory organs, and the 6 objects would work in such a way that they would intertwine with each other. That is the causes and conditions that is dependent arising. But in actuality, none of them are truly existent. So the Buddha told Ananda, saying that Ananda, sense awareness arises because of the sense objects. The appearance of objects exists because of the sense organs. The appearance and perception, both devoid of a nature, support each other like intertwining reeds. So over here, the Buddha explains to Ananda, saying that the external objects are very much correlated to our eye consciousness so that we can see. And then there is the eye consciousness that relies on the sensory organ, that is the eye root. So by relying on the 6 defiling objects, there are the 6 organs, or the grasping of the 6 sensory organs. After such grasping, then there is the form and the seeing, the form aspect and seeing aspect, or the phenomena that is associated to the external objects as well as the subjects that is the seeing. To these two, they are still correlating to each other. Without these two, then there is no consciousness. That is just like intertwining reeds that would intertwine each other. Though that these two reeds or two intertwining reeds or three intertwining reeds that looks just like a tripod would be growing together, but they all share one root, and that root is empty. That is according to Master Oyi, which points out to the lack of self-existent nature. Though the reeds may seem to be intertwining with one another, however, inside them they're simply empty, and their roots are not separated. They're of one root. In such a way, our sensory organ and object, as well as our consciousness, though seems to be intertwined and working in such a way that one would correlate to the other, however, these are in fact no other. This is such a profound teaching. Sentient beings would often have this subject and object. At the time our subject and object, this dichotomy would disappear into the Dhammadhatu, then the grasping towards self and grasping towards the phenomena would cease, and then sentient beings would no longer be wandering in samsara. And the root of such dichotomy is the sensory organs and their defiling objects. And then the Buddha said that, therefore, you now base your knowledge on awareness and perception, but that is fundamental ignorance. The absence of a view regarding awareness and perception is nirvana, the true purity of no outflow. How could there be anything else in the midst of it? This is really important teaching. Great numbers of masters would quote this particular teaching. Also, great numbers of great masters attain realization by this particular verse, so it's quite important. Over here, the Buddha points out that you should know that the root of ignorance is that base your knowledge on awareness and perception. The absence of a view regarding awareness and perception is nirvana. The absence of such is nirvana. It is no outflow. It is not contaminated. And it is completely pure. How could there be anything else in the midst of it? Previously, we had already listened and learned that the root of nirvana is only the 6 sensory organs, that other than that there is nothing else, and same applies to the samsara. So over here it points out that if you were to have this knowledge, if the knowledge is on existence, then this is to the view of a mundane being, and if you were to hold on to a non-existence, then that is nihilistic. That is also the fundamental ignorance. That is also the root of dichotomy. So you would not be able to attain liberation. But then, what is the foundation for nirvana? Then the foundation for nirvana is that without a view, it is the absence of a view regarding awareness and perception. It is neither existent nor non-existent. It is parted from any of the extremes and elaborations. In such way, this person would be able to attain nirvana. It is without flow. It is without contamination. It is the true mind. It is completely pure. if you were to abide in such a state, then there is no existence, non-existence, and the is and is not, and so on and so forth. There is no more such kind of dichotomy. According to the five lamps, the teaching from very famous Zen teaching, it is said that the Zen master Yuan, at the time of studying Surangama Sutra, he had a great faith and he attained realization when he read this particular teaching. Back then, the punctuation was different, so when he read it, he understood it in a different way. At first, he understood it as knowledge on awareness and perception is fundamental ignorance. And then the second part was if there is absence of a view and then comma, regarding awareness and perception, that is nirvana. And over there, he noted that this is the place where I attain realization. Of course, there are a few different stories included in the Zen record, the Zen teachings record. For example, since Master Yuan became a great realized master, after he is passing into nirvana, some of his disciples, out of great sadness, dug out his grave and opened up his coffin and then supplicated to him. And then the Zen master got up from his coffin and then he went back to give teachings to his disciples. After finishing giving the teachings to the disciples, he required the others not to disturb him. So he went back to his own coffin and then lay down in there again. Ever since then, his disciples no longer dare to disturb him. Anyhow, it points out really how profound this view is. According to Avatamsaka Sutra, there is a passage that's very similar to this. It says that if one were to have a view, then that is defiled. That is not having a view or not seeing. If one were to part it from any kind of view, that is as if one were to see the Buddha. So, if you were to have a view, and this particular view refers to any of the view of holding on to any kinds of existence or non-existence, and those are all contaminated, so those are not a correct view, and those are considered as the most inferior view. So what is the right view then? The right view is parting from all views. It is the same as stated in the 400 verses of Madhyamika. It simply points out that the real view is devoid of view. It is not to have any of the grasping towards existence or non-existence. That is the true correct view. Then the world-honored one, wishing to restate this meaning, spoke verses. Some of these parts are repetitive and some are not, but these are stated in verses. There are two of those that's not repetitive, and then the rest are repetitive, and there's a specific name to it. Anyhow, in the sutras, we often see some verses that simply repeats the teachings that the Buddha had given previously. In the Vimalakirti Sutra, we also studied it the similar way. Some of the teachings were given firstly in the long teachings, and then the Buddha would reiterate it in verses. It is only because some sentient beings would be able to get it right away in the first round, and then there are sentient beings who would be able to get it in the verses. So the verses the verses over here says that in the true nature, conditioned things are empty. They spring from causes as illusions do. Things unconditioned neither rise nor cease. Unreal they are, like flowers in space. This is also quite important, such a well-renowned and well-known teaching. The first two talks about the existent are empty, and the two says that the unconditioned are also empty.
他这里呢就是讲到什么呢？就是讲到这个真心这个有为的话呢，就是有为法的这个所有的。
So all the conditioned things, such as the root, object, and consciousness.
他们的话呢，就是应该是这个有它的这个相和这个性，就是有两个，就是。
They all have the form and the nature. Both the form and the nature are of conditioned. And the nature of both the form and nature are not subject to any of the true existence, and they are all conditioned. So, as long as they are conditioned, they are dependent arising. Therefore, they are simply illusions, because they spring from causes. In terms of the unconditioned, it was stated very clearly by Bhavya Viveka. Also, at the very beginning, we talked about there was one scholar whose name was Lu Wei, and he pointed out, he stated 100 questions regarding Surangama Sutra to demonstrate he has the doubt, the reasons he doubts the Surangama Sutra as a fake sutra. He states that, well, if the sutra stated in such a way, why would it be also stated in the Shastra that's composed by Bhavya Viveka? It is indeed, some scholars have too much of their own dualistic thoughts and elaborations they would impute in such a way to verify their own ideas. Whenever you read into the sutras and shastras, you notice that great masters would constantly quote from the sutras to verify their ideas, and would explain their teachings through quotations from the sutras. Over here, it talks about the conditioned and unconditioned. And when we look at the unconditioned, we can use the threefold inference. That is, for example, the true nature is conditioned. Why is that? It is because it arises from conditions, just like illusion. And then the unconditioned is without birth and death. Why is that? It is because they are not truly existent, just like flowers in space. To sum up, truth or false are all without any true existence. Now, the next part, the Buddha then continued to say that to speak of the false is to reveal the truth. But both the false and the true are false themselves. If there is neither truth nor untruth, how can there be perceiver and perceived? Over here, the Buddha points out that false and truth are false themselves. There is no truth nor untruth. The so-called truth simply is a false manifestation, and the false is the manifestation which is also false and illusory. So the false and truth does not have any true difference in its nature. As we would say that, oh, the rainbow is false, but there are the truth to the different colors to the rainbow. But when we look into the different colors, that they are also false. So there is neither truth nor untruth. How can there be perceiver and perceived? Since in its nature, the true and untrue are already devoid. There is neither true nor untrue. Then when it comes to perceived and perceiver, there is definitely no existence either. The perceived refers to the object, and the perceiver refers to the sensory organ. And then between them, the two, in fact, have no nature, thus they are likened to intertwining reeds. The knots and their release have a common cause. The sages and ordinary people's paths are not two. Over here it points out false or true, truth or untruth. In fact, there is no solidly existent nature to them. As we had said earlier, everything is correlating to each other. They are simply depending upon each other, just like the reed, just as the reeds that's intertwined to each other. It is of the same roots or same cause. The sages or the noble ones and the mundane beings are of not two paths. The nature is simply knowing or not knowing. As long as there is a reference point, then they are not existent. There is a quotation from the fundamental wisdom of Madhyamika. It says that if one dharma were to be existent by having a reference, then this dharma is not truly existent. Just as the reeds, they do not have any true existence. According to the Surangama Sutra, it also says that let it be truth or untruth, let it be false or not false, the worldly and the transcendental, all of those are simply the false language, the language that is very temporarily used. And there is no way to express the true nature with such a false set-up language that we use. In such a way, then the knots or a fetter of the knots are no other. That is why the very foundation of ignorance and liberation is the six roots, because the six roots are simply like the intertwined reeds. They would relate and would intertwine with each other. Other than that, there are no two paths to the noble ones and the mundane beings, because the mundane beings would hold on to the six roots, and if the mundane beings were to read off the six, the grasping towards the six roots, then they would be noble ones. There would be no other than the noble ones. Then the Buddha said, regarding the nature of the intertwined emptiness, existence, both are not. Dark confusion is simply ignorance. Bringing it to light is liberation. So the Buddha said that, well, regarding to the nature of such kinds of having a reference point, having something that is rather intertwined, then emptiness and existence both are not, which means the Dharma that is parted from all the elaborations and four extremes. And then the Buddha said that dark ignorance or dark confusion is simply ignorance. Bringing it to light is liberation. We are simply confused. At the time of being clarified or bring such ignorance into clarity, into light, then you would be liberated. According to some commentaries, it says that how difficult is that? How hard is that? But if we were to hold on to this mind, then we would be always intertwined with ignorance, and our mind would not be liberated. But Ananda feels that this is quite difficult. If Ananda feels it's difficult, we definitely feel it's really difficult too. But I think Ananda did a great job, kept on asking the questions and pursuing this question. So the Buddha gave us such great numbers of pith instructions. Now we have already finished this part. We'll continue next class.